Does he have a microphone? We caught Arnie napping back there, Ken. Good job, Arnie.
Well, good morning, folks. I've just been shaking my head in awe, actually, for the last day, just because you're in the room. Getting this group together is just probably, in my mind, one of the best first things we've done. You're going to, I think, really enjoy our next speaker. And I was thinking, Jim, as I was thinking about your history and my history with you, I've known Jim now for the last 16 years, I could put you in almost any group in this room and you would fit right in. Jim started his career as a faculty member in communications, and he could really be really comfortable at this table with Andy and Trigg talking about the great literary works of our world. Jim impressed me in 1994. We were both AC fellows together. I actually thought, Jim, until I got to know you, was the smartest person I'd ever met. He would regale us with literature, and I was really quite taken with the guy. He could sit with Tom Dowd back there in the faculty senate. He went on to chair his faculty senate at his university and learned a little bit of something about the politics of university. And then he was really blessed, in my opinion, because he went to work for the Council on Higher Education in Kentucky as the vice president of academic affairs. And he was blessed because he worked for a guy by the name of Dr. Gordon Davies. And I don't know, Jim, about your reflection of Gordon, but I was able to work with him in Virginia, and he was the smartest guy I ever knew. Gordon just absolutely goes off the chart with what he knows about higher education policy. I owe in part my being here to Jim Applegate, because 2 years ago, Jim and I were at some sort of NGA meeting, National Government Association meeting in Washington. We're having some wine over at a reception for Senator Edward Kennedy, and we decided we'd go to an Indian restaurant and talk about our futures. Now, we'd had a lot of wine. But when we got there, both of us were pretty convinced that in 2 years we shouldn't be at the place we were at that point in our life. Jim was at the Postsecondary Council. I was at Cumberland County College. And I can't tell you how delighted I am, Jim, that 2 years later, you're now the Senior Vice President at Lumina Foundation, working on all of their program development. That's a foundation that really is leading this country with our thinking about how to move more people, particularly at-risk students, to places of success. You know, we're linked to that group through the Achieving the Dream. So I bring to you today a scholar, a leader, a policymaker, and occasionally a fund person, and always a fun person. Jim, we're delighted you're here. We look forward to your presentations. Thank you so much for coming.
No? Victory. It's part of the problem, trying to have strong enough voice to make a difference. Well, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for a lot of reasons. Thank you for joining our ATD effort, Achieving the Dream, to really, we've been funding that program now for 5 or 6 years. We've invested with our partners $120 million. We have over 100 community colleges involved, really focused on the things you're talking about here today. How do you mobilize your leadership, your data, your work around a student-centric model that really focuses on student success? So thank you for that. Thank you for being here, and I know yesterday I was here toward the end of that. I'm glad Tony Carnevale is okay. We've given him several $1 million to do his work. If he dies, I don't know, that's not a good thing for us. And not good for Tony either. But I want to thank you for coming here and being willing to make some hard choices, because we know that's what's got to happen across this country if we're going to succeed in the way we want to succeed. And more than anything, I want to thank you for the work you're going to do after I leave and after this day is over and tomorrow is over and next week, where you really begin to take this into action and scalable, sustainable change that will make a difference for your students, because that's key. We are in a time of great crisis, no question. But I believe we're also in a time of great opportunity. You know, this country has faced crises before. When we were attacked on December 7th, 1941, we didn't sit around and and we had no military basically, we didn't sit around and wring our hands and say, we don't have enough tanks, we don't have enough boats. We should just probably try to ride this out and hunker down and hope this storm passes. We stepped up to the challenge. After World War II, when higher education was asked to step to the plate with the GI Bill and literally transform this country in terms of generation after generation of students now who are going to college because their parents and grandparents got to go to college, in some cases now great-grandparents got to go to college after World War II. And in higher education, although we had a few whiners, we didn't whine and say, we don't have enough buildings, we don't have enough teachers, we don't have enough faculty. We stepped up and we educated a whole generation of Americans that continue to have ripple effects. When a president stood up long ago now and said, we're going to land on the moon in 10 years, and we didn't have in all of NASA the computing power that you have sitting on your desk right now. We didn't sit around and say, the moon, it's a long way away, and it'll cost a lot of money, and we don't have it, and we got a lot of other problems. We landed on the moon, and we did that. And now we have a young president, says something about my age when the president starts to look young to you, but we have a young president who's challenged us again and said by 2020, the United States will lead the world in post-secondary education attainment. We will reassert our leadership in the world because right now we're going the wrong direction. For the first time in memory, our younger workforce, 25 to 34-year-old, is less educated than our older workforce, and we're going backwards. But it is a time of great opportunity. It is a new day, I think, is dawning, not only because of what's happening with the president, with the American Graduation Initiative, in recognizing how we must respond to this crisis. I have been in the foundation world now for 1.5 years, so anything I say you can take with a grain of salt. But I spend a lot of my time with my foundation colleagues at Gates, at Kellogg, at Ford, and Kresge, at Hewlett. And foundations are beginning to realize that we have to have sustainable support strategies to address this college completion agenda. That we can't have the short attention spans we've had in the past, that we can no longer be charitable bankers who simply give out money to good causes, that we must set goals, that we must do our part to leverage sustainable, scalable change that makes a difference. And it's a day dawning where I think, and you've heard it in the conversation in this room, I heard it last night in the conversation over dinner and drinks, where things like, you know, statements like, you know, all kids aren't college material are rapidly becoming unacceptable. I had a conversation several years ago with a group of superintendents of public schools, and I laid out on a chart a bunch of data that told them what happened to students who didn't get to some form of post-secondary credentialing and education. And what happened to them was they were 3 times more likely to be unemployed. Males particularly were much more likely to have an unfortunate encounter with the criminal justice system. They died sooner. They were more obese. They smoked. And after I did all that, I heard that from a public school superintendent. Well, you know, Dr. Applegate, that's all well and good. But, you know, not all my kids are college material. And I try to be politic in most cases, but I fear I treaded on the edge of not being politic there. And I said, Mr. Superintendent, I said, okay, you're the expert, you're out there, you know your district better than I do, so I trust your judgment. I said, here's what I'd like you to do in the interest of transparency and honesty. I'd like you to have an assembly in your gym at the high school, and I'd like you to invite all the students that you have decided are not college material. And I'd like you to invite their parents or their grandparents or whoever it is that's taking care of them and loves them and cares about their future. And I'd like you to stand up there and show them my slides about the consequences, excuse me, the consequences of not moving on beyond high school to some form of college, post-secondary credentialing and education. And then I'd like for you to tell them, and you know, folks, unfortunately, we've decided that's not you. That is you, as a matter of fact, not going to college. And I said, you know, if they're okay with it, I'm okay with it. And I don't think they'd be okay with it. And